Hmm.
Hello and welcome back to another Refrigerated review. I've kind of decided that I'm going to keep going unscripted with this kind of commentary because I feel it contributes more to this relaxed, cooled off refrigerated atmosphere. So that's good for the show, and I hope it's good for you. If you don't like it, please leave a comment. If you think I should go back to scripting stuff, I think that would be a good thing to comment on. So anyway, we're going to talk about two recent re-releases on GOG. I know I just talked about GOG last week, but they are on a real roll this year. Like, I feel like this is GOG's year to shine, because, you know, they've released a lot of really great indie games like Hand of Fate. They got Witcher 3 Wild Hunt coming out. They've released a bunch of Star Wars games that have rarely seen the light of day. They've released these games that you're looking at right now, these Star Trek games that haven't seen the light of day either. And they've also unshackled, as they've put it, a lot of really newer releases like Darksiders, Saints Row, Metro Last Light. They're all DRM free now, and they're all on GOG. And you get the sense that GOG is really, they're upping their game. They want to take down Steam and they want to take down DRM, and I hope, as much as I love Steam, I hope they succeed in creating this DRM-free gaming world. So, good on you, GOG. I hope you continue to keep this ball rolling throughout the rest of the year. But, you know, this isn't a GOG review like it was last week. This is a Star Trek review. And I have to confess that I'm not that big of a Star Trek fan. I mean, I do like Star Trek. There's a lot of Star Trek that I like. Like, Best of Both Worlds is like my favorite TV episode probably ever. And Wrath of Khan is one of my favorite movies ever. But I'm not one of those fans that can tell you, like, oh, well, this is how Starfleet works, and this is how they're one of the best dictatorships around, and this is the politics and the technology, and I can't tell you any of that. I'm sorry. But I like Star Trek, and I'm able to admit that it has its faults, but it's a generally good show, and it has a lot of really good episodes that discuss a lot of political ideas that other TV shows at the time really wouldn't touch. So I'm happy for Star Trek, and I'm glad that it's a thing. But anyway, we're here to discuss these two games. Star Trek 25th Anniversary, kind of a outdated name nowadays, and Star Trek Judgment Rites. These two are point-and-click adventure games in the Star Trek universe. And I'm joining these two reviews together because they're pretty much the same. Judgment Rites is pretty much to 25th Anniversary as Bayonetta 2 was to the first Bayonetta, or as Super Mario Galaxy 2 was to the first Super Mario Galaxy. They're pretty much the same. You know, the fonts changed a little bit, but overall, if you've just finished 25th Anniversary, you can jump into Judgment Rites, no issue, right away, and it's going to feel exactly the same. So I think of them as basically the same game in two different chapters, so that's how you should think of them as well. The first thing that really jumped out at me about these two games is how authentic they feel. They have all the original sound effects, they have all the original phaser firing and tricorder sound effects and everything. And they feature the original voice cast as well from the original show. And you can definitely tell that these actors are getting way too old for their roles. Like, I think there was a joke in this one Simpsons episode where it's like, Star Trek 12, they're feeling so very tired, and they're old men and everything. That's kind of what this game feels like, except they don't look old. The sprites still look like how they did back in the old 1960s TV show. But man, you listen to DeForest Kelley, who was still alive back when these games were made. I think this was his last role as Dr. McCoy. And you can really hear that he's aging, and he's really not fit for the role anymore.
I don't suppose you'd enjoy the psychological release of a few good belly laughs, Spock. We could open the canister right here, if you like.
I would strongly recommend against it, Doctor.
But, you know, with all that said, they still fulfill their roles really, really well. So maybe that's not so much of a bad thing. The point-and-click puzzles are usually pretty simple, but when they get challenging, they get really, really challenging. For example, there's one chapter that largely relies on a pretty good knowledge of Star Trek chemistry. and it took me a while to figure out a lot of that stuff. I had to resort to a walkthrough for that chapter. And there's another one in 25th Anniversary where you have to sort of use mathematics to decode this weird alien language and find out door codes, and it's... A lot of the puzzles are pretty scientifically weird. And that, for some people, that may be a good thing, you know, if you're a real Star Trek fan and you can figure out all this stuff. Like, maybe there was an episode where they discussed some of this stuff, and I never saw it. But, you know, if you're a super fan, then you might understand that a lot better than I did. But for me, it was pretty darn confusing. But with all that said, as with any good point-and-click adventure game worth its salt, the story is fantastic. A lot of fans like to think that these games take place during the fourth and fifth year of the Enterprise's 5-year journey. And that kind of makes sense, because instead of having a big overarching plot, the two games sort of have these mini episodes. Kind of like Telltale's games, except they're all, each episode is standalone. So for example, in one episode you might go have a wacky encounter with Henry Mudd, or in another episode you'll go encounter some androids, or in another one you'll face a mad scientist, or whatever. They each stand alone. In the second one, you kind of get the sense of an overarching plot in Judgment Rites, but overall you get the sense that these are individual episodes, and these feel like the fourth and fifth seasons of the show in that respect. And that's another way that 25th Anniversary and Judgment Rites both feel really authentic in terms of the Star Trek universe. One thing you will need to know before you buy these games is that you will need the manual. And like GOG is so happy to do always, they include the manual. And they include the old star map, which is basically a really primitive form of DRM where you have to... They tell you where to go, and you can only figure out where to go if you have this piece of paper. But that's irrelevant now, because we live in a digital age. Anyway, you need the manuals. You need to really seriously study how to play this. It's like any old DOS game. If you just jump in expecting the game itself to teach you how to play it, then you're out of luck. And thankfully, the manual is easy to read, it's easy to comprehend. It's not like TIE Fighter, where they give you like this real backstory, and it's almost a novella in and of itself, but it's still easy to grasp. And once you get a good hold on how the game works, it is really fun and enjoyable. But the point-and-click half is it's just that. It's just one half of the gameplay, and the other half takes place aboard the Enterprise. And there is space combat, and it's not that great. It feels like a poor man's Wing Commander, and it feels simple. For the first few fights, it's pretty hit or miss. It takes a while to get used to. And then the final fight in the first game, in 25th Anniversary, is just completely broken. It's not even fun. And I hear that it was a lot worse back before the CD-ROM version came out, but I'm not sure. And thankfully, in Judgment Rites, you have the option to take out all the space battles entirely and just focus on point-and-click gameplay. So it's not even an issue. It's not even an issue for the second game. For the first game, it is an issue, but you know, that's something you need to consider before you buy these. But thankfully, these are really cheap. You can get each of them for $6, which means it's $12 total. There's a third game in there that they released that I didn't really cover because it looks kind of different, called Starfleet Academy. But if you need a good point-and-click fix, if you wish Telltale had made a good Star Trek game with all the original voice actors before they, died, then these two games are a must-have. Just keep in mind that there's some really weird elements, and that if you're not a big Star Trek super fan like some other people are, then you're going to be lost sometimes. But it's an authentic experience. If you are that super fan and you haven't played these games, then what the hell is wrong with you? You would love these. But even if you're not really super into Star Trek, then these are still really enjoyable. And they still offer that sort of philosophical spin on scientific politics and things like that. So if you like Star Trek in the slightest, then you do need to pick these games up. And they are pretty cheap, they're DRM free, they're good old GOG. So yeah, that's my take on the two Star Trek games. I will see you next week. Make it so! That's the wrong show.